So these are the tools that you'll need for this job. A crescent wrench just to hold your tie rod when you tighten the lock nut. You need a nice hammer to loosen the tie rod from the steering knuckle. You need a 16 millimeter socket, for my case, to loosen a castle nut with a ratchet. And then to torque it back up to spec, you need a torque wrench. You need a 22 millimeter wrench for the lock nut, depending of course on the size of your lock nut, but that was on mine. One or two sets of pliers. I have some needle nose and some dikes to get the cotter pins out and to take care of the zip ties and to get the boot off. And then of course a pair of gloves and safety glasses, because you only have one pair of eyes. As you can see, the boot here over the inner tie rod is damaged and needs to be replaced. So in order to get there and do that, I need to take off the outer tie rod end, which means I'm going to have to loosen the lock nut and then take off the ball joint over here. So to loosen this lock nut, it takes a 22 millimeter. So it seems to be stuck. We'll have to persuade it. There we go. Now that's loose, we have to take off the ball joint over here. So we'll start by opening up this cotter pin over here. Let's bring this out with a pair of dikes. I'll spray this with a bit of liquid wrench. So this is a 16 millimeter castle nut, and so I'm going to just use a using a 3/8 ratchet on it. Now I'm going to turn the castle nut around so I don't damage the threads of the ball joint. And then I'm going to have to whack it over here just to loosen it up. Now I'll give it a few whacks with a sizable hammer. And there it pops. Now as we take this off, there's something we need to be aware of, and that is we need to try and put this outer tie rod end back again in exactly the same place where we had it now. So we have to count the turns. We turn the whole tie rod end from here around to here again. That's one turn. That's two. That's 3. 17, 18, 19, and it came off right there. So we'll start with the with a bolt in the 9 o'clock position when we start putting it on, and then we'll do from there. We'll count 19 full twists to get it back to where it was. Now we'll just take off the lock nut. Now when you're underneath the vehicle, you'll open up the inside of the boot. You'll see that there's a, in this case I have a zip tie that was holding it on the side. So you'll just take that off and then you can slide off the boot. Now the boot will just slide out. Now this boot had ruptured completely, but you can still see a zip tie here on the smaller end, and of course we'll just disconnect this and slide off the rest of the boot. Now it's time to take your new boot and just slide that across. Just keep your vent up there so you can connect that to the vent hose inside. So once you've got your boot in position, make sure your vent line is connected to the top, and then put your zip tie around. Just make sure it's nice and snug, and then just cut it off and you're good to go. Once you've done the back, you move to the front, do the same thing over here, and then you're ready for the tie rod. Once you've got your boot in place, it's time for your lock nut to go back on. Then it's time for your outer tie rod end to go back. We start again in the 9 o'clock position, and then we start doing 1, 2, 3, 18, 19 turns. And then we're going to fasten our lock nut. Now we'll put the steering knuckle back in. The castle nut goes back on. Now this castle nut, I'm going to torque down to 32 foot-pounds for my vehicle. Once you've torqued that down, then the new cotter pin is going to go in, and then you're going to make sure your lock nut is tight on that side. And remember, once you've worked on your steering, it's always good to have your alignment done afterwards, so you make sure that's back up to standard. Now you get that lock nut as tight as possible.